One question for
Here we go.
Scott.
I'll moderate. Yes.
The question I have
Questions from the floor?
Relief line, we're looking at tunneling. Basically, the Don River, we should be looking at elevated options. Is there not a way to actually put an elevated line like the original RTEP did back in the 1980s with the downtown relief line study? They were looking at extended ICTS towers, but we're going to look at full subways. However, elevated, say at the railway embankment at Eastern Avenue, you could actually build a portal right there where they're going to be putting up 15 million square feet of office space. It's going to be a new downtown area. In that area with a couple of stations at that location to run it elevated basically along the railway right of way. But also at the same time, you could incorporate that together with the N-Wave infrastructure. So you could have basically your whole N-Wave steam pipes, and because they have to build a new steam plant in that area anyhow, and a cooling, deep lake water cooling plant. If that could all be incorporated into one system that could tie into the area around Union Station with the rest of the current infrastructure, would that not be a better alternative? It's a lot cheaper. One thing I learned when I was in high school is that subways cost 10 times as much as an elevated line. An elevated line costs 10 times as much as an at-surface line. That was a generalization somebody from TTC told me years ago.
Yeah,
Okay, there's a question. Go ahead.
Let me just comment on that quickly, and I can pass the question off as well. That is something that we looked at. There are options where you can come in with a viaduct through the valley rather than going underneath it. In terms of the cost that you just mentioned, yeah, that's not the figures that I've heard. I think it's more like subway's about 3 times as expensive as LRT. But yeah, it's a possibility, but this is all the things that need to be determined. All this during the preliminary design phase will be examined. You'll do an environmental assessment and figure out which is the best case scenario, and you'll be able to coordinate with other parties and able to build this efficient system. It's just we have to move towards that phase. We need the funding for it. So, anybody else have comments?
I would say that's a very, very sensible suggestion. It's topographically and geologically and many other reasons. But the last thing you want to do is aim it at Union Station. Union Station is going to be a problem of congestion forever.
Yes.
They have to totally rebuild the track corridor or build a second level down below halfway to China underneath the shopping center. I don't know where it
Absolutely.
It's got to find another route through downtown, and the downtown is growing big enough, like Midtown Manhattan, to tolerate another route. And that's where it has to be. I'm not saying where. King, Wellington,
Well,
Adelaide,
King is
something like
the
that.
next alternative is King because of the streetcar capacity there. Right now, it's already at capacity.
Right. There are very few, as big and dense as this city is becoming, there are very few corridors that can justify a full subway, and that's sure one of them.
Yes.
There aren't many others.
Next question. I'll take this gentleman in the blue shirt, and then I'll go to this woman in the red.
I think a question maybe everybody on the panel could address, but what are your thoughts on opening up the Scarborough subway debate in the 2014 mayoral election, and what positions do you see your organization taking? For the OSPE, I mean, it's nice that I think it's cool that we did a study for the DRL, but would you see the OSPE putting out an independent study supporting or not supporting the Scarborough subway line?
Yeah, that is something that we looked at. We were concerned. We talked about how there's been so much planning studies, but unfortunately there wasn't a lot for this. You know, this was a major infrastructure decision that was made without a lack of serious design and consideration, where a lot of other lines throughout the GTA have been studied extensively, and yet this one gets the funding for it. So it's definitely something that we were concerned about when we were.
It's like everybody was sleepwalking when that happened. It is the most ludicrous decision that I've heard in the last 20 years.
I voted no.
And I fact-checked that as well.
Actually voted no 3 times. Just on that, it doesn't matter whether you want to open the debate or not. The debate is still open. We don't have, there's a report supposed to come back to council on whether we like the 2-stop or 3-stop alignment. We don't have an environmental assessment approval. That comes to council. We don't have a master agreement with Metrolinx. That comes to council. So whether the candidates want it to be part of their future, it is.
Keep it in the bureaucracy as long as you can.
Okay, this gentleman right here.
See, when he needs indecision, he'll use it.
So I don't know who to address it particularly to, but in terms of the relief line, as the name implies, it lets the pressure off. But how does that jump ahead of a sort of a system building a New York-style subway or something, with multiple lines, say a King Street line or something, the relief kind of, is that, there's some science behind it, likely, I haven't seen it, but how does that jump to the front as opposed to building a system, as opposed to just letting more people out of downtown and letting more people into downtown? It just doesn't speak to me as here's a subway system. It's just kind of we bring a bunch of people downtown and then let them out at night.
Well, I think it should be highlighted that it's the first step. It is, like you highlighted, that there needs to be a network. There really does. You look at all the science, and Metrolinx has moved to develop that with a whole amount of transit projects. That's really what is required. It's a big move. But this is just the first step, the first link. As Eric Miller has suggested, the downtown is still the biggest employment center. You still have the most amount of people still going downtown, as much as you still now have new amounts of trips going suburban area to suburban area. You still have a lot of people going downtown, and you have to service that need, because that's not necessarily going anywhere.
That's right, and it's the number and distribution of interchange points. That's what makes the network. And the downtown relief line, you immediately have 3, one on the Danforth and 2 downtown to serve it. It creates a network, it relieves the entire system, and if it's properly designed, it can pick up and intercept some of the GO passengers to help relieve Union Station. It can do many things. So it is the key to the whole future network. You're right, it's not the complete, but it's certainly job one as far as I'm concerned. I'm biased, I'm afraid.
As far as Metrolinx, we are looking at network study. So that's our focus, where the TTC in the city, and they're working very closely with Metrolinx on those environmental assessments for the relief line. But one of the things that I talked a lot about was Mount Dennis and how that is a transit hub. So is Kennedy. So is Caledonia, believe it or not. And why? One of our fastest growing lines is actually the Barrie line that comes into downtown. You intercept people at Eglinton Crosstown at Caledonia, and you're intercepting people that are coming from 9 to 5 down into the city before they get to Union Station, as Ed has said. Union Station is going to be very difficult to get any more. I mean, they're looking at double bunking trains, and it's very, very difficult to squeeze more capacity into Union Station. So we need to look at other hubs that take the pressure off as well. So that's what that regional network study is also looking at.
Absolutely vitally important. Yeah.
So if I can just comment, I actually take a slightly different view. I think the downtown relief line is an important piece that we should think about, but it's solving the wrong problem. In my view, and this was actually the way transportation thinkers thought about stuff 15, 20 years ago, we should be thinking about the network piece, but we shouldn't be thinking just about moving more and more and more and more people. That's not the purpose of transportation planning. The purpose of transportation planning is to make sure everyone has access to what they need. And how that plays out in terms of land use planning is we need to actually redress the balance so we don't have that spike that was on Eric's graph where all the jobs are in one place and all the workers are in other places. We need to start to rebalance that. And so our challenge is actually retrofitting first the inner suburbs, then the outer suburbs with transportation services, sidewalks, bike lanes, light rail, that actually encourage local development of mixed uses. So if all of our transit planning is orienting around continuing to get people to King and Bay, the region will fail. What we need to do, and not just build subway lines, but to think about transportation as access. We need to build, we need to retrofit our main streets, our shepherds and so on, so they have something approaching a Main Street feel. And that means sidewalks, it means bike lanes, and in my view, it also means surface light rail. And that's why I always felt that the original Transit City proposal was the key to unlocking that better urban form.
Okay, I've got to go to Peter, but I will ask anybody who hasn't asked a question. I think there's a man at the back. Yes.
Councillor Kerr, Eric Miller mentioned in his talk that he thought the part about education was broken and informing public policy development had dropped away. Do do you have any comments, any suggestions about what we could do about education and working with the technical people, engineers, informing policy
Yeah.
planning?
Well, I'm more of a political economist in the way I think than I am an engineer in the way I think, and I think there's a mistake in the way Art frames it. I don't think that we should be approaching this by saying there is a group of people who need to educate the other group of people about what we should do. That's not the way I perceive things. The way I perceive things is we have a broken conversation, right? We have a group of people who are tired of being told what to do, and a group of people who wish they could tell the other people what to do, but that no one will listen to them. That's because the telling what to do is the wrong thing. What we need to do, I believe, is to reinvigorate the idea that we are part of a shared conversation. We need to understand what it is the people in North Etobicoke, in Rexdale, the people in Malvern, the people in Guildwood, what it is they're so damn angry about. And tell them, okay, if that's the thing you want fixed, here is the way you could fix it, rather than telling, we know what you need, right? So if they feel that it takes forever to get their kids to school, and the job that they want to get is now in Mississauga, and all of those kinds of things, we start getting back to the idea of public reinvestment in mixed uses in communities. And we start to get them off the idea that if they had a subway station, all their woes would go away. But that also means that the engineering discipline needs to spend, I think, more time hearing what the facts on the ground, the lived experience of people is, and not just looking at columns of numbers and I can't tell you how many pencil crayon maps I've seen of potential subway lines. So it has to stop being about maps and start being about lived experience, and it has to stop being about we need to tell somebody something, and rather start being about a conversation where we learn from each other. Now that was a political.
All right. Decode that, please.